important thing to note is that the branding on the chips indicates that they were made by companies incorporated in the US, Europe, or Asia. But the branding sometimes can be faked, counterfeited. So we are now in the process of checking with all the companies that we have identified whether their components are genuine. And then we are trying to trace it with them to understand how North Korea was able to procure those components. The first one is indeed that North Korea was able to produce a missile that was used in Ukraine as early as just a year ago, 2023. And then the second one is that North Korea was able to obtain the components that they need to produce missiles. What was very important for us to show is that North Korea, just like Iran and Russia, is very reliant on non-domestic technology. So that means that the components that they need for their missiles, the semiconductors, the chips they need for their missiles, are not produced in North Korea, and therefore they rely on intermediaries, they rely on industry entities to acquire those components. The first thing that needs to be done is to understand what components are needed by North Korea. This is why we have been able to document those components, to identify the models that are needed for North Korean ballistic missile program. And then the second thing that can be done is that the intermediaries that are purchasing and transferring those components can be identified. We've done it already with Russian systems, Iranian systems, and now with the North Korean missiles as well. And then something can be done about it. Those entities and the individuals behind them can be identified, and the proper authorities can do something about with this information. So this is something that we're still investigating right now, but this is one of the countries that we have identified. We are still, the investigation is still undergoing, and then we need to identify all intermediaries in the chain. But right now we have identified that some of these companies are incorporated in China. So I think it's the first time that the electronic components of North Korean ballistic missiles are being recovered, identified, and traced. And sanctions are working. It takes time for sanctions to work, and the sanctioned entities will always try to adapt to the sanctions, morph, change ownership, change name, change address, and continue to do business. But sanctions and export control in general are making their life more difficult. What we are trying to do is to go beyond this cat and mouse type of game by working with industry to try to identify when suspicious customers are trying to obtain the exact same model that we have identified as necessary for a weapons program, and to pass on this information to the proper authorities so that they would be one step ahead of those companies already. It's the first time that we see something like a ballistic missile made by North Korea being used on European soil. Given the current dynamic of Russia's war against Ukraine, I don't think it was quite surprising to see that they would be using weapons from their ally. It's a possibility. We see that this kind of dynamic is also applicable to Iran, for example, where the Shaheds have been used in Ukraine, and then refinement has been made to those Shahed, and we have seen variation in the construction to make them perhaps more effective. So this is something that we might see in the future for North Korean weapons.